Our devotional thought from the New Testament today comes from the book of Mark, and I call it the problem of changed definitions. When you see the antagonism that came against Jesus in his ministry, you begin to realize that a large part of it was something they said versus what God said. And it's not that they're misquoting God, it's just they changed the definitions of what God said. Let me say that again. They changed the definitions of what God said. Now, oftentimes we find that the bottom line of false doctrines today is not in the scripture that is quoted. It's in the application that is made as they change the definitions. Now, in our text today from Mark chapter 2 and chapter 3, we find two great illustrations of this. One, Mark 2, beginning with verse 23 and 24. One Sabbath day, Jesus was walking through some grain fields. His disciples began breaking off heads of grain to eat. And the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they breaking the law by harvesting grain on the Sabbath?" Now, excuse me. They were not harvesting grain. They were pulling off a few heads of grain to eat as they walked through the field. That's not harvesting. That's, hey, we're hungry. Let's have a little bit to eat as we walk through this field. Now, Jesus showed them that eating was fine on the Sabbath. Look at verse 25 and 26. Haven't you ever read in the scriptures what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He went into the house of God during the days when Abiathar was high priest and broke the law by eating the sacred loaves of bread that only the priests were allowed to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. He said, listen, there's a difference between eating on the Sabbath and harvesting on the Sabbath. The problem is not with what the disciples were doing, and the problem was not with the scripture. The problem was how they defined harvest. Let me say that again. How they defined harvest. Now, it continues in chapter 3, verse 1. Jesus went into the synagogue again and noticed a man with a deformed hand. Since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. Now, again, the problem was not with what the scripture said, and the problem was not with what Jesus did. The problem was how they defined work. They defined work as ministry or doing good on the Sabbath. But Jesus says in Matthew 12, verse 5, haven't you read in the law of Moses that the priests on duty in the temple may work on the Sabbath? Wow. Matthew 12, 5. That the priests on duty in the temple may work on the Sabbath. Now he continues in this context in Mark 3, verse 4, and he turned to his critics and says, does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day of doing evil? Is this a day to save life or destroy it? But they wouldn't answer him. Again, the problem was not the law. The problem was how they defined the words of the law. Now, beloved, in today's world, there's so much error that comes from how people define things. Okay? You and I must learn to stick with what God said and not put new definitions on what God has said.